I mentioned previously I was going to change the way I wired my CB500X to get to power optional accessories. What I have here is the plug from the optional connector, optional power connector, which is underneath the instrument panel on the right hand side of the bike. What I'm going to do is wire in an SAE style connector off of this option power connector. That way I can use this modular connector, this SAE style connector, to connect or disconnect any type of device I want to power off the bike. The appropriate pins for this specific wire are the pin 1A and seal 2 from Corsa Technic. I'm going to be using a 16 gauge wire. This 16 gauge is good up to about 20 amps, which is plenty. So I'd recommend this size of wire. It should work well. When you're wiring this, make sure that the end of the connector you use is the one where the hot is protected. You don't want the hot to be exposed on the bike. As I showed previously in the previous video, you can use a pair of needle-nose pliers to crimp the wire onto the connector and solder that, and then put the seal on the second set of tabs and crimp the insulation on the seal in those tabs. Then these two connectors will slide into position and snap into position on the connector. When you go to install these pins, make sure you look down inside the connector, and one side of the connector will have a latch for the pin. The latch for the pin should line up with the open side of the pin. Now, when you take this part of the connector off the bike, look at the color of the wire on the other side of the connector. So on my bike, with the latch oriented toward me like this, the center wire is the green wire, that's neutral. The wire on the right is the red-purple wire, that is the switched always-on wire. The wire on the left is blue. The blue wire it's switched off of the high beam light, so the blue wire should be hot when the high beams are on. When you push the pins into the connector, you should hear a click, and then if you pull on the wire, it should not come out of the body of the connector. You may need to use a small flat-bladed screwdriver to push the seals up into the base of the connector. They don't always want to go in. So this is how it looks. Center wire is neutral. Wire on the right in this orientation is the switched always on. And as I mentioned before, you want to make sure you use the side of the connector where the hot is protected and the neutral is the exposed side. So now when I plug this onto the bike, I'm going to have a connector. One thing to note as well, I used kind of a long wire. On the bike, this connector location is kind of inaccessible. If you use maybe 8 inches of wire, they'll position this connector down close to where the frame is for the forward part of the bike. Makes it easy to access this, and you can then add Y splitters or 5-way splitters, up to you, and power everything off of this connector. So here you have the bike. To get access to this option connector, I've removed both the left and right middle cowls. I've removed the side pieces, which are normally in here. Those come out with it's a plastic pin connector in the hole here on either side. Take that out and this piece comes out. And then there are 4 bolts, the silver headed bolts here, here, and then same on the opposite side, you take those out. Now according to the maintenance manual, you should be able to then pull the entire panel off of the bike and remove the connector on the back of the combination meter, as they call it. I don't know how that is supposed to be possible. The wire for the connector is no longer than this, so it's almost impossible to get access behind this to get that connector off. I will mention as well, so once you undo those 4 bolts, and take these pieces off, you want to pull outwards on the outside part of the plastic. That'll release 2 latches. Another thing, there's actually 3 latches on the top which connect it to the other plastic piece. This is not mentioned in the manual either, so you need to push down or pry up on the other piece to pop those 3 latches, and this will come out. It comes out just enough so you can get access to the option connector, which is inside of the kind of clear plastic or clear rubber guard here. You can push the latch from the top, pull the guard down, push the latch, and take the end off the connector piece. So this is the connector. It's a 3-position connector. And if you look closely, you can see the color of the wire. So that's what you want to check on your bike to make sure the wiring is the same. So on my bike, middle wire is green, wire on the left with the latch facing me is blue, wire on the right is red purple. So as I mentioned before, all I had to do is connect my modified version with the SAE connector right under this, and the wire will come down to about here, which is the lower part of the front frame, and provide easy access to that connector. When you're buttoning up the installation, one thing to notice is the 4 screws are not the same size. The 2 largest screws are the ones up here on the top corners, the exposed ones, and the screws with the smaller diameter are the ones that go on the outsides. So I've got the connector plugged in. I don't know if you'll be able to see this, with the wire run in front of the frame for the front end, and then the connector hanging down here. So you'll be able to zip tie this. You want to make sure you're outside of the sweep of your fork range, but if you run it in front of the frame, zip tie it to the frame or cable tie it, it'll make a nice clean installation. So now you've got an SAE connector up here off the front end, switch to your battery. So on the 2016 bikes, as I mentioned before, Honda has both of these options connectors powered off of the same fuse, and that's a 10 amp fuse, so that will provide basically plenty of power to power multiple accessories, including maybe LED lights or USB outlets, GPSs, and so on. You'll be able to power anything reasonable off of this connector up here.